keys to streamlined cars. From crystal sets to television. From uncertain flight to round-the-world airliners. In these 20 years, our cameras have served you as the eyes and ears of the world, filming history as it happened. News prepared to spread its wings, aviation came into its own. Symbol of the new air age was 25-year-old Charles Augustus Lindbergh. New York to Paris, non-stop. Routine today. But 20 years ago, Lindy's flight was to be ranked with the voyage of Columbus. Young Lindbergh came home a hero, along Pennsylvania Avenue to a presidential reception. Up Fifth Avenue with Jimmy Walker, to a welcome which only the New York of that era could manage. A world hero, blessedly unaware of the personal tragedy which lay less than 5 years ahead. 1927 was a year of Coolidge prosperity. It was a carefree world. The boom market. Wall Street was easy street for everybody. Brother, you can't lose. And speakeasies, remember? Gangster Al Capone ruled over most of this, and happily we paid $1 a drink for perfectly awful titles. Glamour? Say, the little lady was pretty grand in those last years of the 20s. But the era of wonderful nonsense was riding for a fall, fast. The end came suddenly, overwhelmingly. Our beautiful bubble had burst. We had been living in a dream world of false values. We were unprepared for reality. Panic gave way to despair. Overnight, the richest country in the world had spawned bread lines, soup kitchens, and apple sellers. Paramount News cameras began then to photograph another era that was not wonderful. World depression and the grim sequence of film history pointed straight at war. Our cameras turned abroad, Britain off the gold standard, trying to stabilize a shaky economy. In far-off Ethiopia, Haile Selassie became king, and almost simultaneously from a balcony in Rome, Il Duce boasted he'd grab Selassie's crude kingdom. On the other side of the world, in Shanghai, bombs were already falling. The Japs called it the China Incident. The Chinese called it invasion. Newsreel films came in, giving us our first glimpse of total war. On new term to us, its meaning vague. But these pictures explain. Total war meant war on women and children. It meant death. These were film signposts to World War II. Misery looked out upon a confused world of fear. We were confused too. Confused when Germany came up with a new leader, an Austrian paperhanger. We thought he was funny, this ridiculous-looking crackpot named Hitler. The Nazi salute, we thought that was funny too. Back here, we too had chosen a new leader, with an entirely different philosophy, which was summed up in his first words at his 1933 inaugural.
First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt's ideas of government were to change our social and economic history. The NRA under fiery Hugh Johnson. TVA to provide construction jobs and make electric power cheaper to more people. Henry Wallace's AAA program of planned economy for farmers, blown galley west in the Dust Bowl. Ill winds, but in Europe a bigger storm was blowing. In Spain, civil war. Perhaps you fail to recognize it as mere dress rehearsal for the slaughter of nearly 23 million human beings later. Then, 1936, and Britain had 3 kings in a single year. Even as he trudged behind his father's hearse, Edward balanced the throne against the love of an American woman. The English people and the entire world took a romantic time out, waiting for a king in love to decide. Edward VIII made his decision. He gave up his throne for, in his own famous phrase, the woman I love. But there was no love in Germany. Hitler's program of racial hate was doing wunderbar. You saw the vicious anti-Semitic campaign, which set back the clock of civilization by centuries. You saw the burning of the books, the non-Aryan books. Remember? You thought then that such hysteria wouldn't spread, that England's Chamberlain and Francis Daladier would confine such poison inside Germany. Besides, even Adolf wasn't crazy enough to crash the Maginot Line, the impregnable Maginot Line. Then, one night in your neighborhood theater, you saw this picture, the Nazi rally at Nuremberg, the medieval trappings, the mass power of organized insanity. Hitler, flanked by Himmler and Hess, marching like Wagnerian gods on a madman's stage. You heard the frantic Führer speak.
Really, I think,
You looked into the faces of German children and shuddered. At last you knew, and suddenly feared. Then Munich, and even on the screen you knew they were signing in blood. At Munich, our newsreel cameras had recorded the end of another era. Millions of feet of film had mirrored it, but not all the great newsreel stories of the nervous 1930s were signposts of war. And from our archives, we turn back to 5 historic newsreels, an album of unforgettable film. The Coronation. May the 12th, 1937. For the first time in history, the crowning of a British monarch is photographed. Inside Westminster Abbey, George VI receives the crown his brother had put aside. This ceremonial splendor was virtually the same for Richard the Lionhearted 800 years ago. And now, the great moment that 550 million British subjects, 1/4 of this earth's people, had waited for. Of empire, our cameras turn back to the spot news story that shocked the world. The Lindbergh kidnapping. On March 1st, 1932, from the secluded Hopewell, New Jersey home of Lindy and his wife, Anne Morrow, 19-month-old Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. was stolen from his crib. Bills went around the world that showed the kidnapped latter and followed the famous trial at Flemington. For until this happened, perhaps no other crime had cut so deep into so many hearts as had the crime of a paroled German convict, Hauptmann. State's Attorney David T. Valence cross-examines.
I don't mean a thing when you do that. Doctor, did you swear to one truth in the black courthouse? Doctor, did you swear one truth in the courthouse? Didn't you lie at all? Time and time again, didn't you? I did not. You did not? No. All right. When you were arrested with this Lindbergh ransom money, you had a $20 bill. Lindbergh ransom money, did they ask you what it was? Did they ask? They did. Did you lie to them or did you tell them the truth? Did you lie to them or did you tell them the truth? I said no the truth. You lied, didn't you? I did, yes.
Hauptmann, convicted and sentenced to death, was brought to Trenton Prison. And many wondered if he had acted alone in the kidnapping.
What would it say that 1 second? to win as the innocent man.
While the crime would shock the world and sent the grief-stricken Lindberghs into a restless retirement, the electric chair ended the life of Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Now, camera, action, and here is the newsreel story that has to be seen to be believed. The Tacoma Bridge crash. This was the $6.5 million suspension bridge that earned the name of Galloping Gert. Its rigid sides acted like sails, and in any wind at all, the bridge put on its act. Motorists got seasick crossing. Closed 4 months after completion, Galloping Gert let go in the 42-mile gale of November 7, 1940. Report on the South Chicago Memorial Day riot. In 1937, newsreel cameras saw this happen. Armed strikers and armed police in front of a South Chicago steel plant. Tear gas and clubs and bullets casting an ugly cloud over an American scene. 10 people dead and 90 people injured because tempers on both sides had overcome reason. Years ago, a Senate committee studied these films. For here was the unprejudiced eye of the camera focused on what should and could have been an orderly demonstration. This was an ugly picture, but it was and is a picture to make Americans think. To think not so much about what's this particular incident off, but to make us all remember that in these United States, common sense and understanding can and must prevail. Last in our album, perhaps the most unforgettable newsreel picture of all time. Hindenburg. It was May 6, 1937, 7:23 p.m. at Lakehurst, New Jersey. A routine flight for an ocean veteran. Ballast dump, everything on schedule, and the Paramount News camera grinding away. 36 of the 97 passengers lost their lives in the hydrogen furnace that had been the world's safest airship. And 2 governments studied this unforgettable picture. Newsreel evidence of 90 seconds of history. But a newer, more terrible history was yet to be filmed. In 1939, our cameras saw Germany's guns